guys, welcome back into the Shadow Box. I am Carlise, your host, your grief and trauma coach, and your shadow work guide. Today I have with us Anna. Anna is a healing specialist. She is also the founder of the Five Facets of Healing. She is also a life and spiritual transformation coach, a globally recognized author, speaker, and worship facilitator. And she's an energy medicine practitioner, like myself. She is also a teacher and an international spiritual medium who specializes in helping you turn struggle into success and heartache into healing. Anna, tell us a little bit more about yourself and welcome into the Shadow Box.
Hi, thank you. So I love how you introduced yourself as your shadow box facilitator. And the first thing you said, I say I am your healing specialist. So everything that I do focuses on how we heal conflict and grief. And my biggest overarching message is no matter your circumstance, you can experience full spectrum healing and live a life that you love.
Yeah, and that kind of goes against the norm of what people think, right? Because a lot of people who are experiencing some sort of grief or some sort of trauma or some sort of adversity, they have the tendency to think that they will always be in that position. And you come and give them a lighter side of the spectrum of saying, like, hey, there is another side over here, right?
There is. And I like to say I'm a beacon of hope because I have experienced full spectrum healing and I know that it's possible. And it's not only possible for me, it's possible for you and for each one of us. And one of the things I think we hear often in the grief world, the bereavement world, that your grief is forever. And what I, in my own experience, have recognized, and the people that I've worked with who've gone on to experience their own success, is it feels forever. While you're really in the throes of it, it feels forever.
Yeah.
It does not have to be forever.
Yeah. And forever is it's such a word that seems like it just lingers, right? A word that just has no ending, which is what forever really means. But when we think about forever humanistically, it's like we know that forever is not forever, And so when we think about forever not being forever, we know that those spaces in time or those moments in time have the ability to change and shift as time goes on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it again, feeling forever. And there's actually a mathematical statistic to why it's that way. So, and I actually just looked this up the other day to get the numbers. I ran the math. So, to a 5-year-old, one day is a greater percentage of their overall life. So the day feels longer. And for a 30-year-old, one day is a smaller portion of their life. And it actually, the numbers, and I don't even want to quote because I'll get them wrong, but the difference in the ratio in those numbers between a 30-year-old and a 5-year-old, how a 30-year-old's day feels much faster. And then when you go to 50-year-old, I do remember that statistic. A 50-year-old's day is 1.65% times faster than that of a 30-year-old, because again, the older we get, the smaller the percentage of each day is in our overall life. And what I like to say is that when we enter into a grief experience, when we have a loss event, we often are navigating new circumstances, things that were unfamiliar. We often have to navigate legal systems or funeral homes or legal. There's so many aspects that we have to cover that we're not familiar with. And so what we're doing is we're entering into a space that what I say is basically like a day in a 5-year-old's life. We're in the infancy of this part of our life. And the longer the space of time between that, we learn more. And then that area, that grief experience becomes a smaller percentage of our overall life.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing that you say, because a lot of the times when you are growing older and you enter into different phases of your life, it's like your patience wants to run thin, because you're thinking that your time is so short and I don't have time for this, right? But then when we look at it as in the 5-year-old spectrum, it's like, since it seems like it's such a long day, it's like, oh no, you have plenty of time, right? But the frustration is the aging. The frustration is the notion of, maybe it's the way that, maybe it's all the years that I have already lived that makes me feel as if I'm running out of time, but I still have the same amount of time in the day than that I did when I was 5 years old. But it
Mhm.
may be, filled up with some different adult things, but I really do have the same amount of time. So I love that, me being 43 and etching up the scale here, I love that you put that into my mind, because I want to be intentional about realizing, hey, you have time, right? You have some time to do whatever this 50-year-old life is bringing you right now. So,
Mhm.
I'm gonna slow down time for myself a little bit, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have this little joke about time, and I've used it for years, and I share it with my clients or anybody who will listen. But quite often we're like, well, I need to make the time, or we need to find the time. How many times have you said that? I know that I have. And what I realized is, and the joke is, you can't make time because we only have 24 hours in a day. You can't find time because it's not lost.
Yeah,
And so
that
you
is
have
awesome.
to claim the time for your own. And
Yeah,
another thing I say is, everything in life is a trade-off. We have 24 hours in a day and we fill it, whether we're
yeah,
sleeping, working, eating, driving, commuting, running, watching TV, binging on ice cream,
yeah,
crying. We fill that day. And so
yeah,
when we decide that we want to do something else, we have to, as you said, to use your word, intentional about,
yeah,
okay, where do we, from the day that we already have, what am I doing that I'm willing to take and replace this new thing that I want to try with? And
yeah.
that's one of the things that I personally love about the work that I do and this Five Facets philosophy that I've developed is, it's all about making grief and healing more manageable, breaking
Yeah.
it down into simple bite-sized steps in the complexity and overwhelm of the bigger picture.
Yeah, and I absolutely love talking to you. And I know when we did our our pre-meeting, we
Same.
can go we go everywhere, right? And
Hmm.
so we can go everywhere,
I was a paint
and
gun. It's a
right.
splatter gun. Yeah.
But I love it, because we could spend
Same.
this whole time on time, right? And so now that, because you've come into this area in space, the space and time in your life, what actually propelled you here in this space of grief, and how are you navigating that?
Mm. So, my story, really kind of how I came into this body of work, is my firstborn son, Gavin, died following unexpected delivery complications. He just turned 35 on Mother's Day this year. His birthday actually fell on Mother's Day. And I remember distinctly having this thought hours after I heard the words, I'm sorry he didn't make it. And that was, I didn't want to spend a lifetime mourning him. And what I say is, I didn't know what that meant, what it looked like on the other side, or how the heck I was ever going to get there. But that seed had been planted. And over the next 7 years, 6 years and 10 months to be exact, I had two complicated but successful pregnancies, two 6 week, two second trimester miscarriages, a 6 week psychiatric stay for severe depression, and one final pregnancy. 6 weeks before that child was born, I discovered that my husband and my best friend were having an affair.
Oh, well, you
All
just got slapped
kinds.
all over the place, didn't you?
And all different forms of
Yeah,
loss. And there was one question that drove me during that 7 year period of losses, and that is, how is it that some people go on to live happy, fulfilled lives following tragedy, mishap, or mayhem, while others succumb to drugs, despair, a life avoid, or suicide?
Mm.
And I relentlessly pursued those answers. And all of the answers that I found, I started to see different threads across people's stories. And for example, this program, it's a 5-part program that is literally all the answers that I found. And
Yeah.
there's 5 different modules and components. But at the core of it, the center of it all, is that we are each born with 5 universal gifts, which are what I call the 5 facets. And that's the academic, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual sides of the self. An
Yeah.
ability to learn, to feel. We're born into a physical body and a physical environment. We all have the ability to connect to the world around us. And that's different for each one of us. It could be people. For alliteration, I say people, pets, plants, or place, right?
Mm.
And then the spiritual facet is the divine self within. It's not religion. Religion can be a support tool for that, but it literally is the soul, the divine essence, whatever
Yeah.
word you want to use. And that those facets drive our suffering and success. They impact and influence our suffering and success differently, as each person has their own hierarchy. And at the top of the hierarchy, that facet literally drives the bus of you. And if anything, you
Yeah.
have to learn to manage it. As you go down the hierarchy, it's less daily impact and influence. And when you get to the bottom, that's like the foundation of your house. And
Okay.
it's sort of like out of sight, out of mind. So you have to be intentional about supporting it. And as all of this information was coming to me, my whole life, even as a little girl, I always wanted to be a helper. I always
Yeah.
wanted for people to feel better. And so Gavin's death and that string of losses helped me to hone in on how I want to help people. And then as I assembled all these answers that truly led me to, I speak to a lot of groups and individuals. And what I always say is I did figure out what I did want,
Hmm.
going back to that morning, and it was to be able to celebrate Gavin's life. And I
Yeah.
truly, 100%, there's not a single aspect across my entire being that mourns him or that I'm sad. I truly
Yeah.
celebrate his life in every way.
Yeah.
So,
And we're going to get into that some more because that is very interesting that you say, like, I don't mourn him anymore. Like, I celebrate him, I don't mourn him. Let's, because you had a little break in there where you really had to, that humanistic side of you had to um had to expose itself or feel what you were feeling, and that's when you had your psychiatric stay. So in that moment, in that time, what was that like for you? What was that breaking? Give us some details of
yeah. So that shadow side, right? The shadow side, dark night of the soul, some people
that.
might call it. So I literally, when I say I was having suicidal ideations every day, that's it was many times, multiple times a day. I spent a great deal of time reflecting on how I could and thinking about how I could die by suicide and make it look like an accident.
Yeah.
I spent a great deal of time journaling. And when I journaled, it was sometimes it was normal writing, and then sometimes it was f-bombs that crossed multiple pages at a time, where I was just venting what I was feeling. Some days it looked like I was running a business, and so most days I would show up to work because I had to.
Right.
But on those days when I didn't have to work or when I wasn't working, I oftentimes was on the sofa and couldn't get up. And then interspersed with that, there were also, moments of joy. when I look back at my journals, I would share a joke, or I would share something that one of my living children had done that made me smile. And that's how, I know, and it's one of the things that I work with people on, is recognizing what I call those healing moments, those micro moments that go walk hand in hand with that shadow self. And at the at the pinnacle, one of the turning points for me, there are two of them actually. So there was a point where I literally at night when I would go to sleep, and I generally am not someone who says prayers at bedtime. It's not been my sort of thing, but I remember distinctly going to bed one night and saying, "Dear God, you know that I don't have it in me to end my own life. Please take me. They say you're a loving God and you don't give us more than we can handle, and I can't take any more." And that particular night, I now know it was a dream visitation. It would be many years. It would be 2016 before what I say I got dropped into the deep end of the spiritual ocean. But Gavin appeared that night and he said, "Mommy, you need to stay. People need you."
Yeah.
And so, and then when I had that point where I just felt like there was no end, that was when I asked my spouse at the time to drive me to the psych ward, because my brain wouldn't shut off. And I do think that on the spiritual end, that was kind of a point where the veil, as they say, kind of opened up, and I was experiencing a connection through audio to the
Yeah.
outside world. And I was also replaying in my mind like hundreds of conversations that I've had with people simultaneously. So I was just being bombarded with that. And I literally thought I was going crazy.
Yeah.
And then flash forward to the end of that 7 years, sort of where I went from there. When I discovered the affair, I remember sitting on the floor for hours and just like waiting for the world to swallow me up. At that moment, it felt like I literally had lost all hope. And I just sat there and it was just like, okay, come get me because I'm done, and I
You
can
know,
laugh and smile about it now. But
yeah.
after hours, I realized that wasn't going to happen. And
Yeah.
so I had to make a choice, and I got up and I made a phone call and then picked myself up, so to speak. And then just, okay, what's next?
Yeah. Would you say that losing Gavin and then, well, first losing Gavin, would you say that it's opened up that other side of your shadow? Because when I'm listening to you, it doesn't seem like it just started there. It seems like it may have been things that were trickling down throughout your life, and
Mhm.
that was a big, that was your bomb right there. And so, would you say that that was the case, and it was just you were filled over to the top and exploded, or how would you?
So I'm going to be perfectly transparent. I haven't done a lot of shadow work and delve into, I hear the expression and I understand the dark night of the soul. From my perspective, from what I do know, we're all born with both sides, right? We're born with the shadow self and the light body, however, whatever terms you want to use. So it's always a part of us. And there are different occurrences and experiences in life that will elevate or bring one of them to the surface. So was it Gavin's death that brought it to the surface? It might have been the onset of that. I really think that it was the culmination, because I had dealt with hard things before.
Right.
But I think it was the culmination of all these different types of loss events that really it was like compounded, compounded, compounded. And I was having to really look at so many different aspects of myself and asking questions beyond just one level. I was asking, with the miscarriages, was God punishing me for something I'd done before? Just one of the examples. So yes and no. For me, I think it was the culmination of everything that really brought me to that point where I was at that proverbial cliched rock bottom, where it was
Yeah.
like, okay.
And that, that shadow aspect of self is, of course, it's that subconscious coming into the conscious, but it is also all the things that you've been conditioned to believe about yourself. And so when
Mhm,
you've had so much adversity just coming after you and after you as you're growing up from a child all the way up to, the ripe age of what you were when this happened with Gavin, it's like what gives. And when that what gives actually breaks that levee, then that's when it starts to open you up to all sorts of who am I's?
mhm.
Who am I to exist here? Why is this happening to me? Why do I never feel like I am enough? Why do I feel like X, Y, and Z? And then you go into that spectrum, that whole spectrum of saying, I don't even want to be here anymore. I didn't ask for this, So
Right.
that's why I asked you that question, because I think that when some people think about suicidal ideations, it's usually been driving for a while.
Mhm.
It's usually been driving for a while, and then
Imagine,
that
yes.
impact comes, right?
Mhm.
So that's
Yes.
why I asked that question.
Mhm. Yep. I had had a suicidal thought as a teenager. So yes, actually, that had been there for a while. And to take what you said about that shadow self breaking open and like reflecting on who am I would take that one step further and apply it to the five facets.
Hmm.
So really, I'm looking at all the relationships that have changed and how I fit into those relationships and who am I spiritually as a divine being, and am I worthy or not worthy? That's the spiritual facet. The
Yeah.
physical body, the changes that come with that, and trying to understand, the emotional triggers and what we're going through and the thoughts. So that's the physical, and how that impacts each person is different. Of course, the emotional facet, right? Trying Somebody who was always very stoic and
Hmm.
trying to maintain that facade when,
Right.
yeah, I mean, there were a few people in our community who ended up learning about what had happened. And they're like, people would say to me, you have the perfect family. Like, oh,
Hmm.
your family's so perfect. And I'm like, And what I say is, you never know what's on the back side of a closed
Right.
door until you're on the other side of it. And so, yeah, it really does impact your entire being.
Yeah.
That those elements that can be part of that deep, deep shadow work where you come into that, pardon my French, but WTF.
Yeah. Literally. I mean, it's like for one, because it's unfamiliar, and but
Mhm.
it's always been in you, but you've always felt, it was aspects about yourself that you were shamed about, aspects about yourself that you didn't like about yourself just because it wasn't a societal norm, or the family
Mhm.
felt a certain way about it, or even generational things that has passed down that you're
Yeah.
reenacting, but you don't know. But you're
Right.
like, "This feels a little funny. This feels, it's not getting me the results or the reactions that I would think that it is." Well, maybe because this is
Mhm.
not really of me, right?
Right.
And so that's the some of the aspect on that. When you Identity is huge. And so when we're even talking about the five facets, and we're talking about the shadow work and just coming within into yourself and shedding all of the things that society has slapped on you, because by the time society and family is done with you, you're just a little shell of yourself and you don't even know it. Like, everything on the inside of you is like, oh, wait, but I'm here. I really am here. And until you dig through it, you don't find it, right? So identity, you were losing children. Here you are, a woman. Why can't I hold on to these children? What's wrong with me? Where am I not good enough for this? Am I not supposed to be a mother in this? Am I gonna, these things that you kind of think about. And then you fast forward and you have your husband over here cheating on you with your best friend on top of that. So it's like, okay, what is it with me? What's wrong with me? Tell me how did you handle finding out that your husband was cheating on you with your best friend?
Uh, well, it depends on the moment. So it immediately, I pulled a picture of us off the wall and smashed it on the floor. And I was smoking a cigarette and I tossed that on the floor and I ground it into the carpet. So there are many people who would say, well, she didn't handle that quite so well,
Yeah.
you know? And if I were in a place of shaming myself, I might say that too. That was how I handled it. And, there's a certain level of shock, a natural shock protection that kicks in anytime we are faced with a significant trauma or a
Yeah.
traumatic event. And trauma is different for anybody. I say, a significant life loss event. So that feels traumatic. And so I kind of went into go mode. I really I, after that initial moment, um, I really went into this state of calm. After I went to her house and tried to confront her and ask her, like, as I was driving there, I was like, just imagining why. And he had called her and told her that he thought I was on my way to her house. So she never answered the door.
Yeah.
After that, and then driving back home, just this sense of calm. It's like this quiet calm, um, while everything inside was blowing up, and it was okay. What are you going to do? And do you want to stay in the marriage? And then I was asking him questions and really trying to get a handle on what was going on. And I was advocating for why. So ultimately, when I asked him why, he said because he was in love with her. So that I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I'm what, 7.5 months pregnant. Um,
Okay.
so it was like I knew I needed to take care of myself for the baby. I mean, there were nights so he ended up leaving. There were nights when, I would try and find him,
Yeah.
pull my two smaller kids out of bed and put them in the car. I mean, there were nights that I can sit here and say, I'm not real proud of the way I handled things. And yet you, you handle things the way that you do. You cope with
Yeah.
things the way that you do in the moment. And just above all else, there was this deep knowing that I was going to be okay. I didn't know how. I didn't know how, but I knew I was going to be okay.
Yeah.
So,
And that again, just going back to that identity shift, like if I could go back just from the story that you told me previously, just from childhood and then going into the pregnancies and then finding this out, and you already had suicidal ideations when you were a teenager, like that flips you upside down. And it's like,
mhm,
well, what about me? What about me? And when you go and you start to grapple, for, like you said, I would try to go to find him. I'm pulling my kids, because it's like, don't abandon me, because I feel like life has already been abandoning me so
right.
much,
Uh-huh.
right? And so you're trying to hold on to whatever you thought was something that was supposed to be sustainable for you, right?
Yes.
And go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, for me, it actually, when I did the reflection, the shadow work is what we call it now. But when I really did the reflection, for me, it was a great fear of rejection, which is it's akin to abandonment. And it would be a number of years of seeing that where I would realize the many different areas in my life where rejection would show up.
Yeah. So losing a child, husband cheating on you, that's rejection. And once we start to keep grappling at it and not finding at least a common ground to acceptance, that's when it crosses over and starts to become abandonment of us abandoning ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which in turn, if your husband would have stayed, he would have abandoned you, which he literally did. Go ahead.
No, no, I'm just waiting for you to finish because that's brilliant. I mean, Carlise, that's brilliant. I never thought about that. So, in for the sake of avoiding the dejection of other people and other things outside of me, I did abandon myself, and I never thought about that. I mean, that's a huge connection, and I hope for anybody who comes to this podcast that I'm sure that that is going to resonate with somebody. I never made that connection. I did abandon me for the sake of trying to avoid rejection from other people and life itself. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you get lost in the shuffle. And so when that happens, it's all of the you that you have been trying to chase and find all of your life gets stumbled over. It just gets trampled over.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just one of those things over and over and over again until you come to a point which you said that, you said a prayer and you talk to God, whether whoever you want to call God, spirit, universe, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When your prayer was answered. And even though it was like it sent you to the psych ward, you had to go and go through that process. It's like that was God's way of saying, okay, now it's time to stop you in your tracks. Now it's time for me to reveal something else to you so that you can have a different understanding or a different perspective of what's going on here, right? And so when we think about that, that was your spiritual breakthrough of God saying, like, Anna, you are special. You are enough. You are, all of these things. You're not just a happenstance. Your life really does matter. So I'm sorry that I have to break you in this way in order for me to reveal who you really are to yourself and into the world. But here we go. So there you were, almost into that getting dumped, like you said, into that ocean, right? Tell us about that ocean dumping.
Yeah. So there had been, I was always a big academic. If I couldn't see it, touch it, feel it, I really resisted it. Big, big skeptic about the spiritual world. Even though I was having experiences, I would talk them away. Going back to science class, right? As early as probably first grade, I think, when they say, everything's made up of energy. And I remember thinking, this table's made up of energy. Mm-hmm. So I'd been having experiences, different things had happened, and each one of them was like this little glimmer. It was like, that really is too much to be coincidence, and I'm having a hard time analyzing that away.
Yeah.
So really the very initial sort of breakthrough came when I'd been with a massage therapist for 6 years. And she said to me one day, she came in and she said, when we had esoteric conversations and things about the universe, right? So she said, I'm trying out this new modality. Can I try it on you? And I'm like, what is it? And she said, well, we work with the angels. And I was like, oh, dear God. Like, we work with the angels and the energy. And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, oh, like, you just do you. And I do say, I teach IET now. And, I say to my students, like, if I hadn't known her for so long, I probably would have, I might have said, thanks, but no thanks, and not ever come back. But
Right.
it literally she did what's called like a 5-minute empowerment session with this integrated energy therapy that's
Yeah.
channeled from the highest vibration of the angelic realm.
Yeah.
And literally, it was life changing.
Yeah.
Like I had a visceral reaction in my body that I couldn't deny. And I asked her what it was. And so IET works on 9 cellular memory areas in the body that store trauma energy. So guilt, shame, distrust, fear, heartbreak and betrayal, stress and powerlessness, anger,
Yeah.
resentment. We've all experienced them, right?
Right.
So I said, it was over here. And I said, what was going on over here? Because literally, when I had that feeling, I was like, part of me wanted to get up off the table and just leave.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know what this is. And I grew up in the South. I grew up with, certain things are taboo. And that was kind of one of them. But
Yeah.
anyway, the still voice within that knew that spiritual facet just said, you're going to be okay. So
Yeah.
she got done, and I said, what's going on here? She said, well, we're releasing anger and resentment. Now, she had just had her first class. This is actually where we store anger over the liver.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh. And what's funny about that is I never really thought I was an angry person. I could be pushed to the point of like patience, 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 and then explode. But I
Hmm.
was never thought of myself as an angry person. I don't wear t-shirts. Ironically, I had a t-shirt. It was Calvin and Hobbes. It said, every day of my life, I'm forced to add one more name to the list of people who pissed me off. And I
Okay.
wore it till it was threadbare. I didn't think about any of this until hindsight, right? I think it was Steve Jobs said you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward.
Yeah.
And my former husband would say, I'd come home and he'd say, I'd say, something pissed me off today. And he's like, everything pisses you off. So that was if the way I describe the energy center is like a little bucket. And
Yeah.
every time you encounter that energy, it goes in like a drop of water. So
Yeah.
my anger bucket was overflowing and in the way of me saying pissed off. So from
Yeah.
there, I immediately, it's a whole nother series of synchronistic things. I
Yeah.
ended up very quickly training. I found myself in taking different classes, learning about like meet your spirit guides. I
Hmm.
started seeing the spirit world. I
Yeah.
had been seeing the spirit world, but I was like, man, making that up. I was seeing my son. I was seeing my best friend at the time's mother who died suddenly. And I thought it was just, it's like, that's just a figment of my imagination. But
Yeah.
then I started having other experiences that were validated that I couldn't explain them away. And it just literally snowballed. And that's where the energy medicine and looking at aspects of the soul, I came across different concepts. One is the life purpose concept that Dan Millman brought to us. And that is the soul comes here to learn 3 particular life lessons through experience, through
Hmm.
challenge. And when I ran my numbers and looked, I was like, all of a sudden, these things, my life and my experiences started making sense for the first
Yeah.
time ever. So, yeah, a lot came on board very quickly of all of these different spiritual concepts.
Yeah.
And I just started learning that, wow, I'm not crazy. I'm not losing my mind because they were validated again and again through the people that I was sharing messages with.
Hmm.
I knew nothing about. Their loved ones would show up, and then through other people that I met who were able to give a language framework around what I was experiencing. So yeah, it was a fast and wild ride,
Yeah.
and yet for me, as I said, it really has helped me understand the broader and greater aspects of myself outside of this human body, right? There's an
Yeah.
expression that, and I'm guessing you've heard it, but we are a spiritual being having a human experience.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's so much it's so much deeper than that. And when you get in tuned with yourself, I always, and I started this in my own meditations and just starting to talk to my higher self, because I was like, there's something outside of me, or there's something, not that was outside of me, it was something that was more than me, that was calling me to think in a different way, that was calling me to think in a higher spectrum. And as I really started to talk to my higher self, and my higher self started to talk to me, and it was like, oh, this is how this conversation is supposed to go. The higher self is supposed to talk to me, and I am supposed to, follow through. And so how I was talking to myself, like, this is your higher self talking to you through your spirit, from your soul, or to your soul through your spirit into this human body, because there's all these different facets, and your soul was there first. Your spirit is the one that shows up as in this human body, and what we're actually, projecting into the world. That's how it's supposed to go. And so when you come into yourself in such a way, the coming into it is like a death. Like, you're literally dying to yourself. That's why they
mhm,
say, like, the dark
mhm,
night of the soul, right? Because
right.
you're just dying all over the place, right? And so it's just like dropping dead everywhere.
Way, yeah.
Yeah, and so I would ask you, once you started to unfold this, and the spirit world started to really unveil itself to you and trust you into these certain spaces, would you say that that was your saving grace to help you to start to process your grief with everything that was going on?
I would say so. For me personally, the whole academic piece,
Hmm.
that was, so what I later learned, once part of getting dropped into that deep end, was that Gavin and I actually had a soul contract to do
Hmm.
this work together. And so him from the other side of the veil and me here. So
Okay.
he actually was, through me, providing some of the inspiration for this body of work.
Right.
So that for me, the the soul aspect was the part of me that knew that there was something so much better on the other side. And for me, that appeared in the form of hope. Like, I always just had this fierce hope and belief that there was something better and life would not always be so painful. So,
Yeah.
in the context of what you're saying, and I never thought about this in this way, I
Hmm.
think that that was the hope. That was the connection to that higher self that was
Yeah.
whispering within me, hold on, hold on, hold on to hope. And in my book, Digging for the Light, there's where I wrote about that, really sort of the darkest times of navigating that. It's a reflective memoir. So it doesn't just talk about the the shit that happened. It
Yeah.
shares the thoughts and the processes and the things that I did that took me out of it.
Yeah.
But I wrote, sometimes I succumbed to the darkness, and there's a series of journal entries there. And then it says, and sometimes I clawed digging for the light.
Hmm.
So for me, and I'm curious to see how it relates to you. So for me, one of the things when I started reflecting on the higher self, what I see is that the soul, we actually, it's one continuous extension
Hmm.
from the upper realm, whether you want to call it heaven, universe, the other side of the veil, like whatever, the
Yeah.
connection of source. The soul is there. It's a continuous extension between those two dimensions that anchors us here into earth. And so we have, like, times when we have those deja vu moments,
Yeah.
things like that. For me, it's us making a connection to that higher self. When we're having those conversations and getting in touch with that, I see it as a continuous extension. It's not part of us is here and part of us there. It actually is combined. So where it helped me is it deepened and broadened once I went into the depths of looking at the soul and being open to those aspects, what it did is it broadened the scope of the healing that I'd already done. It
Yeah.
added depth and dimension to it on a new level because it gave me additional resources to call from and integrate and identify with. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I do believe that it is one extension. And because your higher self is up in those in the spiritual realm, the heavenly realm, whatever you want to call it. That's where
Mhm.
that is your guide. And your soul coming down here, your soul is the connection to that guide. And that's the soul that speaks to the inside of you, right? And it's only when you become familiar with your soul that you're able to not only hear your soul, but you're able to hear that higher self as well.
Correct.
So you know your soul is familiar with everything because
Hmm.
you are soul. So your soul is familiar with everything. And then you come down into your spirit, and your spirit is who you're reflecting to be. Right. So what it did for me, and then here we go into the bottom half of the human body, but what it did for me is that it held me accountable, because now that I know what I know, and now that I know that there's a higher source of even myself that I can and will and supposed um to there's a particular word that I want to use, but that I am supposed to consult with, right? Because I know that and I'm supposed to consult, I am supposed to be able to come into this body through my spirit, and I'm supposed to be able to respond to these things around me and not react to these things around me, right? I am supposed to be able to respond to self and hold myself accountable for my actions going forward, or even my thought processes going forward, even if I have to go back and consult to my higher self. Does that make sense?
It does, and it's so interesting as you were talking. So I used to say I felt like I had a little Jiminy Cricket
Mm,
on my shoulder that was guiding me. I now know, right? It so some people refer to it as the small voice inside, the still small voice inside, the gut instinct, the intuition, the sixth sense, like all of those things kind of tie into that soul. But yeah,
yeah,
it's so interesting as you say that because I did. There were times before I really understood. It's like there's as if there's this little Jiminy Cricket on my shoulder, constantly guiding me and reminding me of who I am and who I want to be and how I want to show up in this life. Even
yeah,
those times when I didn't show up that way, when I respond or reacted,
yeah,
um, and I wanted to respond, but I was reacting to some really adverse situations and circumstances around me. It was that
yeah,
little voice reminding me this is how you want to show up and what can
yeah,
you do about it. So that's it, it's funny, but not
yeah.
funny.
And it's the fear, right? So the fear, that's the part that really messes with our intuition, and it messes with our inner knowing of how we're supposed to navigate ourselves, because we go through all of these experiences, and we're consumed with fear, we're consumed with shadow, we're consumed with anger, we're consumed with sadness, all of the things that little voice or that piece of your intuition gets drowned out. And so it takes that time for us to have to do the work, do the shadow work, do the coming into self, for us to weed through everything, like, oh, okay, there you are. I have been hearing you all of this time, but I didn't know if it was just my fear talking. I didn't know if I was just going crazy. I didn't know, especially when you are a gifted person. That I think that gifted people, and when I say gifted people, I mean people who really genuinely giftedly, God-given giftedly, have access to other spiritual parts of other realms spiritually.
Hmm. And I would say that the details of how we all show up while we're going through the dark night of the soul or the struggle, going through the weeds, as you said, the details of how each one of us show up are different.
Oh yeah.
It's not all the same. There are some common threads of, the overwhelm, the tension, the fear, the sadness. It will be different for each one of us. And the last thing that um, what was the last thing that you said? Because I just lost that train of thought. Um, it'll come
About
back.
holding. Yeah, it'll come back.
Yeah,
It'll come back.
if it's meant to come back, it will come back. So yeah, it does show up differently for each one of us. Oh, I know. You had said that those of us who are gifted, and
Mm-hmm.
truly gifted and God given. So here's my thought on that. And that
Mm-hmm.
is, I believe that based on some of the concepts that I've been introduced to, that the soul says, and this life purpose concept is one of them. The soul decides it's going to come here and learn 3 particular life lessons through experience. And the universe says, great. So it's a collaboration. It's not God saying, Carlise or Anna or Mary Jane, this is what you're going to experience in this lifetime. It's the
Mm-hmm.
soul saying, this is what I want to experience. And God, the universe, source, and the spiritual world as a whole, other souls are going, yes, yes, we are on board with you and we're going to help you up. So we're going to help you
Yeah.
out. And so what happens is, in order to learn those experiences, those lessons, we have to go through challenge. So we find
Yeah.
ourselves in situations, families, circumstances, people show up in our lives. Some of them we have prearranged soul contracts with, that we're going to share certain experiences. Some of them, I do believe there are coincidences. I believe there are fewer than we think. So I don't see it necessarily. Some souls have spent, like, gone through multiple dark nights of the soul and really signed up for a lot of um, what I call ascension. So I believe the soul comes here for 3 reasons. One is to learn particular life lessons through experience. 2
Yeah.
is to serve the world in some capacity. And 3 is to ascend. Each time we do 1 and 2, we ascend in this physical plane. And our
Mm-hmm.
ultimate ascension is when this physical body dies and the soul returns home.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I was.
some
I
schools
was.
have like, nah, I went through all kinds of dark nights of the souls. This time I want to come in and I want to be able to enjoy a little more harmony.
Yeah. I
Um,
was. I forgot. I don't know if it was Dolores Cannon. Um, or it was someone along her line, but they were saying how, because I'm still on the fence on, do we really choose our lives, right? I'm still on
okay.
the fence on that.
Yep. Yep.
So, because I'm like, I don't know if I would have chose this one, right? But when I was listening to this particular person, they were saying how, if you truly come into this life as a student, so you're up in the realms, and you are assigned to come into this world to bring back messages, bring back understanding to this higher dimension. Then it's like, okay, you can't take anything that you experience personal, right? And so some souls do come here, and they have many times on earth or in this life, and they're just living the life. And then you have some people who are coming in as teachers, as guides, as servers. And then you have those who are coming in just as observers,
Hmm.
right? And so we have these different jobs that we are assigned to do, so that we can go back and take it to the other person, or not to the other person, to the higher realm. And so when I heard that, it kind of made it a little bit more digestible, right? All the
Right.
things that we experience and we go through, and the hardships and the pains, it's like, okay, I was equipped for this because I was assigned to this. And so now I'm supposed to reap what I need to, so I can go sow it where, when this lifetime is done. And for myself, I have a keen understanding that, and I know some people hate this, and I don't care, but I have a keen understanding that, some people are chosen and some people are not. And maybe it is one of those aspects of the ones that are not in this time in this day and age are the ones who are the spectators and just the ones that are supposed to live on earth and they just experience this human existence. And then you have the ones who are guides, you have the ones who are the teachers, you have the ones who have that access to the spiritual world where we are literally here to help others and to guide others. Even though we're experiencing as a student, we are here to shapeshift things. And
Mm-hmm.
not everyone is here to shapeshift. And even through the pain of learning and knowing what our soul knows, knowing what our higher self knows, we still have to go through and live humanistically because people would think that we're supposed to float on clouds if we didn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and so I that's why I think we talked about like religion, and how we're just not, religion is so, it's such a ceiling because there's so much more to what we know in the spiritual realm or what's really out there. And you being a medium, you experiencing your grief in such a way of having all of this information and having the gifts that you have, you experiencing it that way, I would imagine that it was even more of a harder impact on you because it's like, why if I am, why if I know and I'm gifted to do certain things, why did I have to go through that? Why did it have to hit me so hard? You know, does it seem like that it hit you harder than like the average Joe, or were you just experiencing it?
Well, I can't answer that because I'm not in the average Joe's body. So, I can relate to certain things. And one of the things that I talk about in the Five Facets body of work in the coaching program, one of the things that we talk about is aloneness, how we identify with being and feeling alone. And there are a number of reasons about that. Tiny Buddha, I wrote an article on that for Tiny Buddha a few years back. But the truth is, we've all said you're not alone. We've heard it. We've said it. You're not alone. And the question that came to me many years back was, well, why do I and so many other people feel alone? And the answer is this: at its most simplest form, we truly are alone in our bodies, in our thoughts, and in our feelings. Nobody else can occupy our mind. Now, that said, I did reflect on the magnitude and the depth of the pain and the suffering that I had. And I also was able to look at that aside from what I knew in my heart of hearts, even as a little girl, that I was here to help heal. I was
Mm,
here to make a big positive impact in people's lives and on the world. And
yeah.
that the world piece of it didn't really start coming into play until Gavin's death and all of these pieces started coming together, that 7-year string of losses.
Hmm.
So what I was able to do is look at it and say, if I didn't know the magnitude and the depths that we could go to in darkness,
Hmm.
I wouldn't know the 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 level of the vibrancy and the light that exist, because they
Mm,
both coexist.
yep.
Light, dark, we label them light, dark, mean, nice, God, the devil, you insert your whatever, right?
Yeah.
And yet at the end of the day, they're both energetic vibrations
Hmm.
and they exist for both of us. So seeing how dark, painful this can be shows how hopeful, bright light, what the other possibility is at the other extreme. And so navigating that and where I'm right now in my sort of personal evolution is trying to find the balance.
Yeah.
So one of the things I had the privilege, Dan Millman, who brought the life purpose concept back, I believe, don't quote me, but I think he was taught it from a sage somewhere and he brought it back and put it into form that we could use. But I
Hmm.
took a workshop with him And he used a baseball analogy that usually sports analogies don't resonate with me, but this one did. And he said, if you take a batter in baseball who's constantly swinging high, constantly swinging, or swinging low, right? But
Yeah.
what do coaches generally say? Look for the middle, look for the middle, look for the middle. Well, he said they can't find the middle because all they know their go to is swinging low or swinging high. So
Right.
what you do is then you teach them, if they're swinging low, you say, teach them now swing high, swing high. Now they know what both of those feel like. And it's easier for them to then find the middle because now they've experienced both. And so looking at that, those extreme highs and lows, right? I right now, what I'm reflecting on where I'm at is I wonder if what our one of our goals here is to not is to learn, then to find balance so that we
Yeah.
don't experience those highs and lows. That's still a work in progress for me. And yet those, to me, those, that middle ground, coming back to something you said earlier about wanting to respond versus react, I
Yeah.
think that being in that more neutral middle ground helps us put us in a better position to respond.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what not what you're referring to, but what you are saying also refers to that aspect of the shadow as well, that shadow work, because we have that light and we have that dark, and we're taught that the dark is bad. We're taught that the light is good. We're taught all these things, and not all aspects of your shadow is bad. You just don't know
Right.
how to integrate them. You have to figure out what belongs to me and what doesn't belong to me, what's serving me and what's not. And so when you come and you put everything out there on the surface, then you start to figure out, okay, how can I integrate these two? Because I know that both of these are a part of me, but I know that now I have to learn how to navigate the dark side and the light side and make them work for the greater good of myself and of the service and of whatever else it is out here that I'm supposed to be doing. And that integration is the part that is more difficult for people because it's that conditioning of self of saying that shadow is bad, that darkness is bad, instead of, yeah, a lot of it was bad, but what did it teach you? And that's what people have to come out of it with. The bad part, yeah, we can take that part and we can set it over here. But now let's figure out what was the lesson. The lesson is what you take into the middle and you integrate into the light so that you produce what you're supposed to be.
Mhm.
So yeah, but that integration, it's hard. It's acceptance, it's acknowledgement, it's being aware. And then what do you do with all that? Because some of the stuff you don't like, you know?
Yeah. And we all have duality. So we all
Mhm.
have those aspects. Like you said, all have the shadow and the light within us. It's a part of us. So interestingly enough, one of the life purpose lessons in this life purpose concept is cooperation and balance.
Mhm.
And that's the two energy, two duality. When I
Mhm.
first looked at this concept, I was like, so mine was trust, trust and openness. So my major life lesson is trust, and it's at its core, it's trusting myself,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
And then trusting others and trusting in the universe and the higher power, but it's trusting in me. Then freedom through discipline, and I was like, oh, I get that because I'm scattered, right? And then I saw cooperation and balance, like, oh, I don't need to look into that one because I think I'm a pretty cooperative person.
Yeah.
Well, the universe, you know how it does. I call it the universe. They keep
Yeah.
tapping you on your shoulder, and there was a series of events. And one day, it led me back to that book, and I opened it up, and it was cooperation and balance, and I was like, huh, maybe there's something here that I need to pay attention to. So the
Yeah.
cooperation and balance is not cooperation with other people. It is cooperation with those two aspects of the self, which you talked about, which we all have now. People with this two energy, it's like extreme polar opposite energy. And what I share with people that I'm working with who are dabbling in this, who want to go there, is in this political climate, that two energy is like having the leftist Democrat and the rightist Republican in the same body. Imagine that.
Yeah.
It's like having the richest man in the world, the poorest man
Yeah.
in the world in the same body. And so that integration that you talked about, that is the goal of getting them to play nice, getting them to cooperate with one another to create balance. And it's
Yeah.
been that was one of the early things that came on when I got dropped into the deep end of the spiritual ocean. And so it was interesting. Again, what I say is I learned other aspects that really validated the experiences that I'd had in my life, and it helped me understand them through, I guess, a more compassionate lens, and
Yeah.
a lens that had more awareness of the infinite possibilities that exist. And one of the things that I say that it's come up twice now, and I in my mind while we're talking, and it was when you said some people don't like me saying this, and some people
Yeah.
get upset. One of the things that I've said for decades is, even before I came into this world, is take what one thread. If there's one thread that resonates from what I say in this conversation, that somebody sees a thread from what you say that resonates, or 10 threads or 100, any
Yeah.
part of it that doesn't resonate, take what
Let it
resonates, discard the rest. And what I say is create your own tapestry.
go.
Because at the end of the day, we're all, as much as we have in common, we're also, the details that comprise our existence are unique. And the reason that we're here, and our for lack of a better word, our role, to use your
Yeah.
your belief about the observers and the teachers,
Yeah.
and so it's important that each one of us discover what resonates with us. And as I said, this is where I'm at today,
Mhm.
in that particular aspect of studying, like the balance. It's not to say that tomorrow or next week or next year I might be introduced to another concept that I'm like, that will shift things a little bit or meld them together. It just gives
Yeah.
me more awareness. And I think that's one of the beautiful things, when we're able to hold on and remember hope
Yeah.
while we're going through that dark night of the soul, while we're doing the shadow work, we're experiencing things that are so painful,
Yeah.
that there really is something on the other side of that. I say light always follows the darkness, always.
Definitely. And you've shown that through your processing. You've shown that. And you even showed it to yourself in an aspect when you said, I didn't used to integrate myself or interact with people who were grieving because, or,
Right.
just in
Yeah.
that world. And so tell me about that and why that was so important to you during
Mm.
that processing time.
So anybody who's going through the grieving process, who's experienced a loss, one of the common things that we impose on ourselves, and sometimes we see society imposing on us, is we got to move forward. We got to get on. We got to get over our grief, right? And so with me very early on recognizing that I know, and I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, that I'm here to help people understand that we can heal. Like, that was my purpose. I don't want to spend a lifetime mourning my son. What does that mean? Ultimately, it meant healing, and healing across my entire being. So there wasn't an aspect of mourning. And my fear, in probably the first 5 or 10 years of the development of this program, was that if I were to come in and say to people, I want to help you heal, it would be like, I'm telling you, you can't grieve and you can't
Yeah.
mourn. And there's enough of that going on. And that was my fear. And about 10 years in, so I think I shared with you on the podcast, the people I was connecting with on social media, they were not my audience. They were, this is 20 years ago, they were women in their midlife, much older, and clothing people, and
Yeah.
it was not my audience.
Right.
However, one day I was driving, and that's the Jiminy Cricket on my shoulder, my higher soul, my guides. They were like, you are going to start interacting with people who are grieving. And I'm like, no, because, and they're like, yes, because here's the thing. People who are grieving need healing. And when we ask the question, how am I going to survive this? What am I going to do? Really underneath that, we're asking, how am I going to heal? At the end of
Yeah.
the day, how am I going to feel better? Well, how do we feel better? By healing. So it propelled me into a deeper exploration of what healing is. And healing happens in micro moments.
Hmm.
So when you are feeling sad and something makes you smile, even if for a second, that's a healing moment. I call them micro healing moments. When you are feeling unseen and some random person opens the door for you and smiles at you and you feel seen, that's a healing moment. And so what I've learned and what I do now is there's two two populations that I serve. One, people who are in active grief. I have different tools, programs that help them to recognize, okay, these are ways that you can create healing moments for yourself, not to deny the grief, but
Right.
to buoy you, to help you remember that there is hope, to help you remember that there is something more. And it's those collection of those healing moments. And then for people who want to go deeper and explore, what are my processes and what am I bringing to the table, and how is all of this going to serve me? It's all intention based.
Hmm.
So when somebody comes in to work with me coaching through the
Yeah.
actual five facets, it's literally intention based. What do you want to achieve with our time together? And then from there, I use
Yeah.
a lens of significant life loss events that you've experienced, not to rehash and stay stuck there, but to help you gain insights into what you're bringing to the table, the elements that are holding you in a conflict and grief pattern, the elements that are a part of you that help you navigate things in the past successfully. It's like all of these details, then helping people understand. Once we have that information, now we can help people create their hierarchy so they have a better understanding of who they intrinsically are and what they're bringing to the table. And just as a loose analogy, like anybody who follows horoscopes, right? If you,
Yeah.
I know enough to just barely even be dangerous, but like Capricorns, right? I have a mirrored astrology chart. Capricorn, Cancer, Cancer, Capricorn. Talk
Oh, wow.
about duality, right? They're opposite signs.
Yeah.
But Capricorn, the mountain goat, the doer, you want something done, ask a Capricorn, right? The Cancer, the water, all emotion.
Yeah.
And so it's similar to that, right? We can see these traits and elements. And so the hierarchy gives us that lens. So when we're going through struggle, we can say, oh my gosh, that's this particular facet at
Yeah.
work. And now you have insight. And one of the things that I say is loss and grief. So I break them up. Loss, grief, and healing are autonomous to me.
Hmm.
And loss is an event, grief is your individual response, and healing is the resolution of the conflict that comprises your grief. So now we have information to inform our decision. Loss and grief are unempowering. We seldom have a say in how those are going to play out, but
Yeah.
healing is a choice. And once we can identify elements, then we can say, oh, okay, do I want to heal this? which of these areas do I want to work on? And that's where I think I mentioned in the beginning, everything that I do is about making grief and healing more and conflict more manageable and less
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Yeah. And I just love, just listening to you and with the things that you do. And it's like, who would have ever thunk it, right? Who would ever think that losing someone and grief can hold so many modalities in it. There's so many things that you can be taught in so many ways you can be taught, so many tools that you can be given in order to navigate what you're actually experiencing, because this is this thing called life. This is what
Mm-hmm.
we're doing, right? And
Yep.
so you have people that have experienced this and now have the tools to show you and to help guide you and to help navigate you, even as we're continually navigating ourselves, because no one is just healed. We're always taking steps to better ourselves and to keep ourselves in order, to keep ourselves maintained, right?
Right.
But
To stay
right.
sane in this big, vast world. Yeah. And
um, oh, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, I say it's seldom one thing that creates the overwhelm, and it's seldom one thing that creates that overall resolution. And that's one of the beautiful things that has evolved for me is on the energetic body, right? The body and the energy field that stores the trauma energies and the success energies, but then being able to work with the body of people who are open to it, to help their bodies release those negative and limiting energies. And it all ties into the work that I do in healing. And so the mediumship, because my sort of lens and scope is healing, inevitably the messages that are coming through from the spirit world are answering to some conflict or question or doubt or sadness that people are having. And so I it's truly an honor. And I want to say I feel blessed to be able to offer, these different services that people, it's kind of like a menu. It's like,
Mhm.
how do you want to create your healing?
Yeah.
And then this is what I have that can help you. And I have a big outer toolbox of people who have other things that I don't have. And if somebody's like, I've been thinking about this, I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
go explore this and see if it resonates with you.
Yeah. Resource, definitely.
Mhm.
So that's I told you, we can go down tangents. We can. I think the last time we talked, we almost talked like 3 hours, I think.
Yeah,
But
and I don't even know how long this has been, but yeah.
it's been.
Yeah.
But I would I because you've come through all the hardships and you're learning everything that you're learning now, and you're navigating how you're navigating. You are servicing people. I want to ask you, at this time and in this space and time, who are you, Anna?
Mm, who am I? Well, I am a divine light being whose purpose here is to help people navigate any conflict or grief and truly just live a life that they love. And I try to embody at its core love with acceptance, meeting people where they're at, people who come to me. There's no judgment. It's like, what do you need? It's not for me to say you need this. It's like, what do you want to experience and how can I help you create that for yourself? And at its core, really, and this is one thing I've been exploring the last 3 years, at its core is true divine love. And that's what I am working on embodying, trying to embody every day.
Yeah. As healers and as people that kind of do what we do, it's when you're learning how to survive what you have experienced, and then you learn certain tools and techniques, and certain ways of thinking to cope with or get through certain things, you learn it and it becomes like it's just automatic. And then we go and teach it to other people. Okay. I ask you, do you believe in yourself as much as you believe in helping the people that you're servicing?
Um, I I do, with the caveat that there are still elements of the shadow self that, as we move up the ladder, there are different aspects that will reveal themselves. And I say once we quit growing, we stop breathing.
Yeah, there you go.
So, yeah. So I do believe in myself. I do believe that I am meant to be here. I signed up to revolutionize the way that we look at loss, grief, and healing, and to really help people. It's we can't we can't. People need their experiences, and yet there are things that we do as a culture and a society that prolongs people's conflict and grief, and everybody's going to be different.
Yeah,
I do believe I'm here to revolutionize the way that we look at those things, to help make it a little more manageable for people. And even if we can shorten their journey by a day,
yeah,
then I believe, if we can make it a little more manageable for them so that they can step into sooner into the work that their soul came here to do,
right.
then I think we're making the world a better place. So,
Definitely, definitely. So, Anna, what can we look forward to? I know that you were just telling me that you just launched a big project of yours.
mm,
What can we look forward that's going to come down the pipeline, and we're going to be like, "That's Anna," and congratulate you? What's going on in your
oh,
world?
thank you. Yeah. So once a month, and the calendar is going to be up later today on my website, but it's the second Sunday, I think, of every month. I'll have a 1.5 hour workshop. It's super reasonably priced at 29 or $27 a session, or you can buy the bundle and VIP. It's followed up by a VIP Q&A. And so I'm really excited about that. And if anybody signs up, wherever you sign up in the series, you will get all the replays. So if you come in month 2 or 3 and you sign up for the bundle, or you're not going to lose anything. You will get all of those replays to go through. So that I'm really, really, each month we'll talk about a different theme and circumstances that people, common circumstances that people face, and universal threads, to again help create healing. And then on Wednesdays, once a month on Wednesday, I have my 5 steps to heal conflict and grief. That's a free workshop, and what it does is it looks at the foundational pieces of this bigger body of work, so you can experience that. And for anybody who is interested in just seeing if they want to work with me, I have a free consultation call. They can go to my website and sign up for that. And I have a simple guide that I call it the empowerment guide, that really helps take you from overwhelm to what you need. And anybody who joins the neighborhood, subscribing to my website for priority access to updates, you will automatically get that free gift. So it's super, super powerful.
Awesome.
Um,
So, and everything that she just listed, all of her resources and her website will be under her bio, under the podcast. So you will be able to get in touch with her and hopefully do some of her workshops, because she's tapped into some things that I believe that others should be tapped into, that would definitely help you along your journey. Definitely.
yeah, and there's actually, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I have 3 different workshops coming up with a woman, Nalda Seldman, who has the Grief Hub. I'm doing
Mm,
an intro to meditation, a writing for self care and self discovery, which is it's not your classroom writing. It truly is for anybody. Those will be going up on my website too. Yeah. So follow me on socials, and on the website. And yeah, I look forward to our paths cross and helping each one of you on your journey, however I can. And Carlise, I'm so grateful for you and the work that you're doing and the conversations that we've had. They're just beautiful.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, definitely. You can tell those two souls who are that are familiar with each other and who kind of they're along that same wavelength. They're along those same wavelengths. It's amazing, and I can't talk to people for a long time. So 3 hours. The last time we talked, I
Well,
think it was almost 3 hours. I was like, oh, we were just going and
we
going
just
and going.
flew. I mean, we both looked at the clock and we were like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much,
Thank
Anna, for
you.
coming into the shadow box and just being transparent with us and just sharing your part of this process, your part of this journey. And I'm so grateful that you have overcome and that you're overcoming these
Mm,
adversities that were, kind of put in front of you, and you're turning your pain into purpose. And this is what grief does when you do the work to become who you're supposed to be, right? And so I just thank you so very much. It has been a pleasure. Yes. And everyone else, thank you for coming into the shadow box and spending some time with us today. And until next time, namaste.